Hi, I'm Dr. Zeest Khan, the Long COVID MD. I'm a physician with Long COVID, and I've applied all of my medical expertise to my recovery. Luckily, it's working, and I want to share what I've learned with you. On this podcast, I help you understand your body and understand the healthcare system so you can move your own health forward. We've got a lot to talk about, but remember, nothing I say here replaces personalized medical advice from your healthcare team. Let's get started. I've got a nice conversation I want to share with you today, and one that is particularly timely, especially for those here in the United States. I'm joined by Minnesota State Senator Lindsey Port. I've got a nice conversation I wanted to share with you today. It is particularly timely if you're here in the United States. I'm joined by Minnesota State Senator Lindsey Port. Senator Port represents District 55 in the state of Minnesota and was elected in 2021. In 2020, she fell ill with COVID, and ever since, she's been dealing with severe symptoms of long COVID. In our conversation, we talk about the anxiety around the election and the new administration, the ways that that might potentially impact those of us with long COVID. We also talk about the realities of working with a new disability and the power of insisting on accommodations. Senator Port explains how state governments influence health insurance and healthcare access, and why, even though we might be nervous right now, we have a lot of reasons to be hopeful. Here's my conversation with State Senator Lindsey Port. Senator Lindsey Port, thank you so much for talking with me. Welcome to Long COVID MD.
Thank you so much for having me.
You have been living with long COVID for about as long as I have. And so you have a lot at stake when it comes to the ways that healthcare meets the problems of people with long COVID. People are nervous with what is going to happen come January. Can you tell me what's on your mind right now as we enter that transition, and what is giving you hope?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm nervous too. I'm not going to put that aside because I think there's a lot of uncertainty about what will happen. And I think those of us who are deeply entwined in the healthcare system know that it's already not working for us, but also know that it could get worse. And it's okay to have that fear. I think it's okay to be realistic. But I also think, one of the things that is so true about the healthcare system is it is really entrenched in the way it currently works. So is government. And in some ways that works for us. We know, as frustrating as these systems are, how they work, and we can still affect change in that way. I really do believe that there are things we can do at the state level to continue to move our system towards a place where it really is patient-centered. It's clearly not at this point. But every step we can take, I think we should take. And I think the thing that gives me the most hope is I know how that change happens in the legislature, in state capitals across the country. It happens by people telling their stories. And I know it sounds really cliche, and people, talk about all the high-priced lobbyists and special interests and things like that. And I would tell you, for me and for most of my colleagues, the number one thing that is most effective in getting us to not just agree with a bill or be a yes vote on it, but to become champions for those things is having a real person come into our office or show up on my Zoom screen and tell me their story and tell me how this piece of legislation in front of me can change their lives. It is the most powerful tool in state government, in federal government. It is easily the most powerful tool. That is something that we really can do to change the system. And that gives me real hope because I have seen over the last 4 years patients, people who are experiencing these things band together and like come up with the most innovative, supportive, incredible resources just within, on Twitter or Blue Sky or Instagram. Like the connection that people have is real and it is very, very powerful. And I am in awe of the work that long COVID and ME/CFS and other chronic illnesses. I am in awe of the way people have come together to support each other. And I think we can use that power to demand change at the state level.
What should we be keeping in mind or keeping an eye out? What's on your radar for the coming years? Maybe these are topics we can bring up with our state representatives.
Yeah, I think, as things move forward, there are a lot of different ways things could come at us. And I think one of the most important pieces is that we have transparency. We already don't have a ton of transparency into healthcare systems, and that is a place we can make positive change. If we put into state legislative laws that insurance companies or the PBMs that they use are required to disclose how many denials they do each year, what illnesses those denials are for, so we can get a better idea of like, is it everybody with a chronic illness that's getting these treatments denied? Is it specific treatments? Is it the illness you have? What are these patterns that we can see emerging? Most of that is behind closed doors right now. Like it's the wizard, pulling levers behind a curtain. And demanding more transparency, I think, is a really good start, particularly as I think things will potentially start to move at a federal level in a less systemic way than they have before. It'll be even more important for us to really understand what the outcomes of those changes are. So pushing for transparency, especially around denials and prior authorization, is something that state governments can do. Like we oversee these insurance companies in our states all across the country. So it is something that state governments have the power to do. I think the other thing I'm thinking about is how can we lessen some of the burdens, some of the barriers that are in place? And for me, that looks like I'm working on a bill for what's called the Office of Patient Protection. We're also looking at potentially adding like sort of a physician's side to that as well, which I think sort of you think of as like a place where you can come with your barriers. Like, okay, I got a denial. I have no idea what to do next. Can you help me through this? Or my insurance company referred me to a PBM to like do this prior authorization. I have no idea what that means. How can you help me? Those sorts of all of these barriers that those of us with chronic illnesses have to fight through every day in a way that specifically impacts our health. Like the barriers aren't just slowing the system down, they are worsening our health while they're happening. And so I think if we had an office in place that was really able to hold insurance companies, healthcare companies, PBMs accountable, it's just absolutely missing from our system right now.
I will attest that that is an area of our healthcare system that needs improving. And I am so happy that you're advocating for change in this realm. I was talking to you earlier about how you're actually doing what you're doing with the new limitations that have been brought on by long COVID. You've come out publicly and told people that you are insisting on accommodations and hopefully helping the next person who has that. I am amazed by that, and I wonder what your take is on and why it's important to share your story with others.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've always believed and sort of had at the heart of the way I work on legislation that representation really matters, and that the people who are closest to an issue, a problem, an idea, whatever the thing is that we're working on in the legislature, the people closest and most affected by it have to be at the table in order to make it an effective solution. Like the people who are closest to it we know what we need, right? And so in that way, I've always worked really hard to make sure that as I'm working on legislation, I bring in the people who are most affected. And now I've had to remind myself that like that's me. Um, and that it's okay. In fact, it's powerful to use my experience to help bring this forward, and to fight for change. Um, because, we should be legislating with our whole selves, and we should be writing legislation that is the most impactful for people. And all progress for marginalized groups has always come because they fight for their own liberation. And so that is sort of the focus of something I've grown into. I would say it is really hard as a woman in politics in particular to talk about something that is perceived by the world as a weakness, as oh, she won't be able to do her job. She's not, you know, she can't be a full-time legislator. She should just, go home and take care of herself. It's not that dissimilar from things I heard the first time I was running that was like, who's watching your kids? Like, their dad. What are you talking about? Like, we have two parents. But it is something that women in politics are not, that we hear all the time. And so it was scary, I will say, for me to come out publicly and say I had long COVID. I had been using a cane at home and at other places, but not in the Capitol because I was worried about how that would be perceived as a woman who needs accommodations or, whatever the case may be. I'm really glad that I told my story because I was spending so much energy masking it. Um, I still do, right? We all do. We put on that face when we feel terrible and say, I've just got to get through this 30-minute meeting or whatever. We all do that, but I was doing it to a really intense level and it was very hard. Now I use a cane to walk around. Sometimes I use a motorized scooter if I'm going a long distance through the Capitol grounds. I would say technology has been the most amazing part of this. Like you, I got sick right away during COVID in March of 2020, as we were all learning Zoom, which would become a really important tool for me to stay connected to my constituents during the pandemic. And then now, as sometimes we do virtual office hours where you get the same amount of time as you would get with me. It's just on Zoom instead of in person. Finding ways to participate fully as a senator, but virtually has really been kind of a unique challenge, but one that I have like fully stepped into. And it's not just people with long COVID, right? Like we're in session for 5 months. Several of my colleagues have given birth during that time. And then they're able to participate from home with their new baby through Zoom. One of my colleagues, Senator Dietzich, our former majority leader, is battling cancer. And she's been able to stay active and chair her committee and all of that while receiving chemo and doing it all virtually. I can chair my committee from home if it's one of the days where I can't walk well. Um, I have a recliner in my office to put my feet up because those of us with neuropathy know like that it can be an absolutely detrimental part of your day if you can't just take those 5 minutes to relax and rest and put your feet up. So I do think it's important for me in this position to talk about it because I have the resources and the political power and the opportunity in my job to have um, these accessibility options, and they should be available to everyone. And I think like me saying it out loud and saying I'm using these things and talking about it opens the door for someone else to say, oh my God, I need that too. And oh, that's going to let me stay in my job. That's going to let me keep doing a thing that is important to me as a part of my life. Um, and I think particularly it is difficult for women to ask for those things because the stigma is that it's a weakness. But in reality, we are really powerfully using our own stories to advocate not only for ourselves, but for other people. And that is like, it's a thing I'm so proud to be a part of and that I see this community doing over and over and over again and just leaves me in awe.
It's easy to underestimate the reality that all of us may be ill at some point. All of us may have disability at some point in our lives. And accessibility measures that are initially tailored to people with disabilities help everyone. Just like equity in many realms doesn't just help the person that who is immediately pushing for it, it has a much broader impact.
Absolutely.
I remember in January at the Senate help meeting on long COVID, I was really amazed by the number of people on the committee, regardless of political party, who are impacted either directly or with someone who they love struggling with long COVID. This is an issue that we know by numbers does not discriminate based on political agendas. And then recently, at the most recent Recover webinar, the NIAID director, Jeannie Marazzo, is trying to assuage our fears that Recover funding is going to be taken away because a lot of the appropriations have already been made. And so the funding is already designated. That made me feel a little bit better, just like it made me feel kind of good to hear that so many people were invested in politics in our government on long COVID. Do you have any advice or ideas of how we continue bipartisan support for long COVID funding and treatments?
Yeah, absolutely. I think again, it goes back to the willingness to tell our stories. Um, like you said, during that Senate hearing, I think almost every legislator talked about the fact that they knew someone or there was someone they like were caring for, that they were worried about. And I think like that is just a universal thing, right? We care for our families, we worry about our families. And with how widespread long COVID is, which I think we're still learning and people are still, emailing me and saying, oh my gosh, I have symptoms really a lot like yours. Do you think I have long COVID? Should I see a doctor? Like there's so many undiagnosed cases that it is continuing to grow in size. So telling our stories is absolutely one of the most critical things we can do. Whether your representative or senator is Republican or Democrat or independent, whatever they are, they know someone who's going through something like this. And telling your story and talking about the resources that we do need to educate physicians to continue to like share that innovative ideas as they are coming through. We need to make a real pipeline for that. So it's not just on physicians' shoulders to talk to their colleagues or to figure it out on their own. We need more education for people to understand, like, oh, these symptoms I'm feeling, they could be neurological. They could be long term. I should go see someone. This could be long COVID to recognize the possibilities of what's out there. To make treatments more accessible is a huge piece of it, right? Like cost, barriers, making things standards of care so that they are covered requires more connection in the systems that we have to do that. And that means like we're going to have to push. So telling your story is a huge part of it. I agree, both on the federal level and in Minnesota, we passed funding for long COVID, both research and outreach to communities, particularly communities of color that we know were hit hardest by COVID, those frontline workers right away, um, to do outreach to them. We put money in. It hasn't all been spent, but it has all been allocated. And so that is a really critical point for future administrations to not be able to claw that back. So I do agree that there is some safety there. What I will say is, you know, the uncertainty is really it's scary, right? Like all of us are scared by the uncertainty. We already have so much uncertainty around our illnesses, and to have that becoming at such a high level is scary. But I don't see any world in which the incredibly innovative and connective tissue between us, between the people who have these illnesses, they can't stop that. There's nothing they can do to like take away the funding for that because we're all doing it on our own, right? Like that is an incredibly powerful tool. And if we can continue to mobilize that towards our state legislatures have an incredible amount of power. When you think about insurance companies, yes, there are some federal regulations and things like that, but most of what is overseen and regulated in your state is done at the state level. It is your state legislatures who can demand that transparency from the insurance companies. It is your state legislatures that can open offices for patient protections, that can put in, you know, requirements of insurance companies, that can change scopes of practice and standards of care. That can all come from your state legislature. So don't sleep on that power. Like that is real power, and they're much closer to you than the federal government. They are, teachers in your schools. They are attorneys in your communities. They are firefighters and nurses and, physicians who you know and who you can have access to, and you can change their minds. I really, truly believe that you can make this an issue that they cannot step away from. And it's really, truly powerful.
Senator Port, I feel after talking to you, my spirit is unflexing out of fetal position, and I feel more hopeful. And the takeaway that I have is that I'm going to reach out to my state representatives and just simply tell my story. I have often been intimidated by doing so because I feel like I need to have a specific call to action and something very formal. But from speaking with you, I am realizing, informing my representatives that I am struggling with this condition and I am struggling getting adequate care is powerful itself and influential in and of itself. Thank you so much for spending some time with me. And hopefully, we're going to hear more from you on long COVID and MD and collaborate in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. I will say just what, even after 4 years, when I found your podcast, it just felt like a piece of home, a piece of like one of those safe places where I can hear and like feel like my whole self. And so thank you for the work that you're doing. I'm just delighted to stay in touch with you, and with this community that you've built here too.
My spirit is now in Savasana.
We all need that. More Savasana in our lives.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to Senator Port for joining me. That was a really helpful conversation. I am left thinking about not only Savasana, but this idea of power. I think that we have more power and influence than we appreciate. However, we have limited energy and ability right now. What I'd like us to do is start thinking of ourselves as a group. And this is what I was trying to reference in my last Substack post as well. We are a team, and whatever we do to help influence change is hopefully going to benefit ourselves, but also benefit others. Small or seemingly small movement or action can be more impactful than you might appreciate. So writing a simple letter to your state representative could be a good place to start, even if you don't have a particular call to action. Spread awareness. At the same time, if you don't have energy for that quote unquote simple task, then you don't have energy for it, and you don't need to blame yourself or feel guilty for not quote unquote doing more. Living, existing, and trying to improve your function is a full-time job, and you're doing the most. You're doing a great job. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have interfaced with politics, if you have been an advocate, if you know much about your state government versus the federal government. You can reach me at longcovidmd@gmail.com or find me over at Substack at longcovidmd.substack.com. Until next time, bye for now.